Hello mortals, I am the BookTube Goddess, the #1 drag queen booktuber on YouTube. Now let me get this out of the way. I really enjoyed Queen of the Conquered, the first book in this duology, and I still recommend it as a standalone book. You do not need to read King of the Rising. In fact, I don't recommend you read King of the Rising, but we'll get there. Since I really enjoyed Queen of the Conquered, which was an anti-hero novel about a black slave owner who owned black slaves in a fantasy setting based on the real-world Dutch colonization and enslavement in the Caribbean islands. So I was excited to read King of the Rising. Now, of course, I want to support authors of color and I want to support trans authors, and Kacen Callendar is both, but ultimately, I want to be an honest book reviewer and I have to call it as I see it, and King of the Rising did not do it for me. So I'll put this disclaimer in now. This is completely my opinion. Others may love this book. You may be one of those who love this book. Also, please don't tag or bring this review to Kacen Callendar's attention. I think this author is fantastic and I really don't want them to see this review. In fact, this is the third book I've read by Kacen Callendar aside from this duology. I read the young adult trans novel Felix Ever After, which I gave my blessing. But in that book, I did feel the plot was a little weak, and weak plot may be kind of a foreshadow here. And before we go on, please like this video, subscribe to my channel, hit that notification bell, and do all that good stuff. Now, in order to do this review, it's going to contain spoilers of both Queen of the Conquered and King of the Rising, so you've been warned. Now, King of the Rising follows the events of Queen of the Conquered, so let's briefly go over the plot of the first book. The titular main character of Queen of the Conquered is Sigourney Rose, a black woman who has the craft, the psychic ability to read minds. Now, the craft in this world is a rare gift that some people are born with, and what it is varies with every person. Some people can detect lies, some people can heal, some people can cause pain, some people can create illusions, and so on. Now, the setting is a string of islands called the Hans Lolik, where the indigenous people of color have been enslaved by the Fjorn, white colonists from the north. Now, they kill people of color born with the craft as a way to keep them subjugated, and by a belief that only white people should have the gift of the craft. Now, the exception is Sigourney Rose. Her family was allowed to be free and nominally part of the upper class rulers, and each ruling family controls one of the islands. Now, the Rose family, of course, ruled the island of Rose Hela. However, her family is slaughtered by the white colonists when Sigourney is just a girl, and she is saved by a servant, and they escape to the far north where she is educated. She comes back to the islands with a scheme to rejoin the island aristocracy as the only black free woman on the islands, and takes control of Rose Hela as her birthright, and she wants to seek vengeance for the death of her family. But even though she starts her venture with a noble purpose, if vengeance is a noble purpose, she also tells herself that she wants to free the islanders, but power corrupts her completely, and her thirst for vengeance twists her motivations. She eventually comes to believe that the native islanders cannot govern themselves without the structure of slavery, and in order to best the white island rulers, she has to become as cruel and as heartless as they are to rise up in their ranks. So basically, she is not a pleasant person. Her craft not only lets her read minds, but eventually allows her to control other people's bodies. And reading minds lets her know that the islands actually hate her and resent her for being a slave master, big surprise, and the other Fjorn rulers despise her for being black. And so she is cruel to the slaves she owns, and she works to manipulate the white rulers of the other islands. Now eventually, she plots her way to the center of power, where she meets Lauren, the bastard son of a white man and a black slave. But Lauren also has the craft that makes him be able to hide his thoughts from Sigourney. Now eventually, Sigourney's weakness is her downfall. That weakness is being arrogant and thinking the islanders are lesser and uncivilized because they didn't have her education and whatever. So she does not see that there is a revolt coming that Lauren is a part of, and the islanders overthrow the colonists, and Sigourney is jailed for her crimes. The revolt sort of succeeds in a deus ex machina manner by a young islander girl named Agatha, who has a powerful form of the craft that lets her create illusions to make others see whatever she wants. Now, at the end of Queen of the Conquered, Agatha shows signs that her power is corrupting her, and she tries to kill Sigourney out of spite, but in the struggle, Agatha actually dies. And the book ends with Lauren giving Sigourney a knife while she's imprisoned, and the message being that she should kill herself. So that's Queen of the Rising. I thought the writing was very strong. It's told in the first person present tense, but Sigourney's ability to read minds lets the story take on sort of an omniscient style, since we can see the thoughts and feelings of everyone around Sigourney because she can read minds. And like I said, I really enjoyed this first novel and think it's a great standalone story. So this brings us to the sequel, King of the Rising, which is told in the first person from Lauren's point of view. Now it picks up right after the ending in Queen of the Rising. Sigourney is still alive and is a prisoner of the Islanders. Lauren is a member of the Council of Islanders who seek to finish their revolution. And most of the northern islands are free, but unfortunately, many of the Fjorn colonists are still alive, though they have retreated to their respective islands in the south. Now, my biggest issue with King of the Rising is the structure of the plot. Normally, a story starts with a complication, which gradually works to a resolution. And in this case, the complication is, of course, the islanders are struggling to finally and completely free themselves from the colonists. The secondary character arc is Lauren needing to find the strength and determination to lead the islanders to a successful revolution. And then there is sort of this tertiary relationship arc between Sigourney and Lauren. Lauren retains some small hope that Sigourney can find redemption for her past deeds. Okay, so far so good, right? Well, in a traditional story, the action has an upward movement. There is some successful movement towards the resolution, maybe a few bumps on the way. Then when you get to the apex of the story, there's the first turning point where events turn down and it looks like the hero is in big trouble. We have the darkness before light, and then there's another turning point where the tables are turned and events work in favor of the hero, which is a race to the climax. And in movies, this race can be a literal car race. Anyway, the climax is a big confrontation where we get the resolution, which is then followed by the denouement. Now, the resolution could be that the hero fails, which makes the story a tragedy. Am I foreshadowing? Yes, I am. So not every story has to follow a traditional story arc, and sometimes subverting the structure of the story works great. Now, King of the Rising definitely breaks a traditional story arc, and in my opinion ends up being the fatal flaw that made this a very difficult novel for me to read. Now, when I explain the rising and falling action in the story, note that there are high points and low points. In King of the Rising, there is almost no high points. It feels as though it is a continuous descent into despair. There is a power struggle within the Council of Islanders, mainly between the warrior Malthae and Lauren, our hero. Lauren does eventually become the leader, but he is continuously blocked by Malthae, who goes so far as to try to kill Lauren several times. But Lauren is empathetic and merciful and seeks to work with Malthae despite everything that happens. And Lauren's craft power evolves to the point where he can absorb other people's craft power. He does this with Sigourney, and since they are now both telepaths, they can form a psychic bond where they can communicate with each other over long distances. He also absorbs the power to heal. He absorbs the power to influence others. He absorbs the power to cause pain. And all this should make him a really powerful individual. But Lauren is uncorrupted by power, and this means he almost never uses his power for anything except maybe Sigourney's mind-reading ability. And he heals people once in a while. Now, the Fjord colonists proved to be really numerous and deadly, but they usually underestimate the Islanders. Even so, they managed to continuously undermine everything the Islanders try to do, and it becomes obvious that the Fjorn are being fed information by a traitor within the inner council. Now, we the readers know that the traitor has a powerful craft ability that lets him wipe people's memories. So Lauren discovers the traitor several times, but then of course immediately forgets because he has his memory wiped. My point is that the events of this novel are relentlessly joyless. There are no high moments. Everything is just one shitstorm piled upon another shitstorm that not only wears Lauren down, but also us, the readers. Even when Lauren travels to the far north to seek an audience for potential powerful allies, he does that so he can escape being killed by Malthae. Now the story ends, and yes, I told you there are spoilers here. The story ends with everyone around Lauren dying, and he is betrayed by Sigourney, who manages to become the leader that attacks the other islanders through her manipulation of the colonists. And in the end, she finally captures Lauren and then executes him. So, yes, this is a tragedy, but what are the lessons learned? We learn it is a mistake to be empathic and merciful. It is better to be pragmatic, and it's better to kill the people who threaten you, even if they're on your side. It is shown several times that Lauren should have killed Sigourney. He should have killed Malthae when he had the chance. Sigourney eventually wins in the end and becomes, if not the ruler of the colonists, the power behind the throne. Now, we also find out she's pregnant by one of the colonists, so will she ever free the slaves? Will her children free the slaves? If there's a third book, maybe there'll be answers, but I'm never going to find out because I can't see myself picking up another book in this world. I found it really hard to read. I need some ups, not just all downs. Now, I suppose it did make me think at the end of the book, but I don't know if it's worth the journey to get there. Now, I do want to emphasize that I still think Kacen Callendar is a talented writer. I did think the prose was really well done, but that said, there was a lot of exposition, too much for my taste, and the paragraphs were really chunky. On my Kindle, and granted I have poor eyesight and keep the font large, but some of the paragraphs took up 2 or 3 screens, maybe even more. One of the things I did like about Queen of the Conquered was the first-person omniscience by way of telepathy. And this continued in King of the Rising since Lauren shared Sigourney's power, but rather than advancing the storyline, it felt like we kept going off on tangents as we got stories and detailed backgrounds of a lot of the people that Lauren was interacting with and reading their mind. So it is with great regret that I zapped King of the Rising. I had to really push myself to finish the book. The journey of reading it was depressing and unfulfilling for me, and in the end it left me feeling hopeless. And maybe that's what the author wanted me to feel, so mission accomplished, I guess. Anyway, if you made it to the end, thank you for watching this video. I know it went on longer than it probably should have. Let me know in the comments below if you agree with me that books should have highs as well as lows. Until we meet again, may all the books you read be